Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time for your Indie Spotlight for the week of November 13th, 2024. This is probably the last time it's going to come out later in the day on Wednesday, because going forward, we've got some sponsors, we've got some giveaways, so we need to get on a little bit more of a regular schedule, which means we might not have time to cover quite as many books as we're going to cover in this particular issue, which, that's not the best. Honestly, one of the things that is possible, us doing it a little later in the day on Wednesday, is publishers that don't send us digital copies, like Dark Horse, for example. Their books come out, and I can buy a digital copy, and I can read it, and then I can still talk about it. That probably goes away if we have to do these a little sooner, which, it's a good problem to have, and not so great of a problem or whatever. So anyway, it's a fantastic week of independent comics. We're going to talk about a lot of them, but because of that, we're going to go a little quicker maybe than usual. And the other thing I want to shout out is what an incredible week it was for DC Comics. So be sure you head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube. Once you're there, you know what to do. Ring the notification bell, leave some comments, like, subscribe, and you'll find out what our books of the week were, which was maybe the toughest choice we've ever had, Rocky, from top to bottom. I think
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
It was very difficult.
I mean, every book could have been a book of the week. Like, I would say, like, the only book that I didn't consider was probably Action Comics, but it was still excellent. And there's a lot of weeks where that issue of Action Comics would have been my book of the week. That's how great the books were. So anyway, go check it out on Rocky's channel, or if you like listening to audio only, whether maybe you're in the car, subway, exercising, whatever. The Comic Source feed, wherever you get your podcast, whatever app or platform you prefer, it's available there. And then obviously, if you're listening to this audio only and you want to check out the visuals of the books that we're going to talk about today, you can head over to the Comic Source YouTube channel. Appreciate a like, subscribe, notification bell ringing there as well, so you don't miss out on any of the content. Doing more interviews than ever. The Ram V interview about New Gods is coming out tomorrow. I've got an interview with the co-writers of Primer, Jennifer Murrow and Thomas Krajewski, coming. I've got an interview with Bob Fingerman, cartoonist extraordinaire, about his incredible book Printopia, coming. There's so much stuff coming, guys. So hope you're all enjoying it, and hope you all got a chance to check out our Absolute Superman page-by-page breakdown as well. I had some people asking about that on the DC Discord. So yeah, if that's your thing, if you want to get our thoughts on Absolute Superman, you can do that as well. Absolute Batman thoughts are in that DC Spotlight yesterday for the second issue. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. First book we're going to talk about. Let me get it up in front of you. Witchblade number 4 from Top Cow. Witchblade has come back with a vengeance. It's written by Marguerite Bennett. Line art by Giuseppe Cafaro. Colors by Arif Prianto. Letters by by Troy Petrie. This is just an incredible book. I've been a fan of Witchblade for a long time. Witchblade was really the first book from Top Cow that came out and put this little-known artist by the name of Michael Turner on the map. Maybe you've heard of him. One of my favorite artists of all time, the late, great Michael Turner, unfortunately left us all too early, succumbed to cancer. But just a phenomenal artist. And if you go back and read that original Witchblade stuff, it is sort of its time. 90s, when there's a lot of bad girl art, that's considered good girl art, because it doesn't get too explicit, but it definitely is sexy. There's no other way to put it, and Michael Turner's art is fantastic. But the other thing that the original Witchblade did, and again, this was a super popular property back in the day, even to the point that it had a show on the USA Network for a few seasons. But it was just fantastic, and it really had some strong female characters. As much as the 90s get a bad rap for, bad storytelling and tropes with pouches and guns and bandoliers and whatever, and a lot of bad girl art and good girl art, they were strong characters. Sarah Pazzini was a very strong female character. So Marguerite Bennett is a fantastic and talented writer as well, and she's sort of leaning into those ideas of a very strong female character. A lot of the concepts are the same here with Sarah Pazzini, but there are things that aren't the same. There are things that are very different. You're going to see some familiar faces, like Ian Nottingham here, but the idea of Sarah as a sexually active person and sort of leaning into that. The Witchblade enhances that. It enhances her desire to eat, to eat delicious food, to just experience life. Like, all her senses get sort of dialed up to 11. So why wouldn't she want to eat food? Why wouldn't she want to have intimate encounters? If it's kind of the usual thing that you feel, that, the usual amount of pleasure, but that's dialed up, then in comes temptation, in comes, all the tension and drama as she's trying to figure out what the Witchblade is. She's trying to solve the murder of her father, who was a police officer before her, much like in the original Witchblade, corruption in the police department. Like, a lot of these things are tropey, but again, there's enough of a new, fresh feel that Marguerite Bennett is giving us that it feels familiar to those of us that read Witchblade back in the day. But for somebody who's not familiar with Witchblade, you're getting enough of the core character that you could go back and reread the original, and it would seem a little bit familiar to this. But again, new and fresh and exciting. So anybody who hasn't read it, you're going to be reading this for the first time and say, hey, this is just a damn good comic with interesting characters and gorgeous art. But if you have read it before, again, there's enough new stuff here. There's enough twists. The Witchblade seems more powerful than ever. How is it exerting influence? What are the differences for Nottingham? What are the interests for Kenneth Irons? Like, all that stuff is still to be determined, with gorgeous art from Giuseppe Cafaro, who I want to say he's Spanish, but I'm not 100% sure. I got introduced to him at LA Comic-Con, but honestly I don't remember where he's from, because we just spoke very, very briefly. But this is a great book. I recommend it. I'm a fan of Top Cow. I love Mark Silvestri. He's an amazing guy. Super talented, and this is scratching all the right itches for me in terms of honoring what came before, but still feeling new and different, and again, kind of a fresh take, if you will.
That's good to know. That's good to know, because I actually got the digital omnibus of the Witchblade series from the 90s, and I read that. That was like a couple of years ago, and I loved it, because it was one of those things that I appreciated after the fact.
Yeah. That
I collected in digital omnibus form. I think it was a Comixology sale or something, and maybe the new what do you call it? The comics
Global Comics
division. What's that?
Global Comics?
Global Comics, yeah. Maybe Global Comics will even have the old, will have the omnibus of Witchblade as well. I mean, because I imagine they have a huge database.
Yeah, their database is growing, and we're going to have some giveaways for Global Comics coming up, which I'll mention since you brought them up. But yeah, Top Cow does Humble Bundles once in a while, and I think they were selling their stuff there. I have both the digital omnibus and the regular omnibus. Like way back in the day when there was things called bookstores, kids. Borders had a huge sale. They had a huge sale. It was like a 50% off sale. Plus, I had like a gift card I'd gotten for Christmas or what have you. So I bought like this $100 like Witchblade omnibus that had like I think the first 100 issues or first 75 issues or something like that. And it literally cost me like $9, because everything else was covered by the sale and the gift card that I had. So it was amazing. It was awesome. So anyway, yeah, everybody, stay tuned. We're going to give some details on a Global Comics giveaway. If you want a free month of Global Comics coming up a little later in the show, the details will be forthcoming. So anyway, that being said, let's go ahead and move on to first book Rocky's going to talk about for this week. It's a big one. People have been highly anticipating this. G.I. Joe #1. Another entry into the Energon universe, as you can see there if you're checking us out on YouTube, from Skybound. It's written by Joshua Williamson, art by Tom Riley. Jordi Belair handles the colors, Russ Wooten on the letters. Give us your thoughts on this, Rocky.
This is basically, probably a good portion of the audience that will be picking up G.I. Joe #1 has has been following the Energon universe, probably from its origins with Void Rivals, leading into Transformers, leading into oh my God, Destro, Duke, Cobra Commander. This is one thing that Image has done really right, and there's been so much excitement and build up for this issue, and this issue doesn't disappoint. You've got all the core characters. It's funny. I was not even into G.I. Joe comics but my brother had all the action figures. And this first issue of G.I. Joe, it's like a who's who. Joshua Williamson does a really good job of every G.I. Joe action figure character gets some degree of spotlight, including, of course, the bad guys, epitomized by Cobra Commander and Destro. And there's even a new character called Risk, which is kind of he's almost like a James Bond character. He's a really cool character. And basically this is, you can go in cold. You don't need to have collected anything else. All you need to know is that there's this new energy source, Energon, and it's basically this Energon is powering the weapons. And there's kind of a cold war of owning the weapons and utilizing weapons, between the forces of G.I. Joe and the forces of Cobra. And that's really all you need to know. And you've got a little bit, you've got Rock and Roll, Stalker, Hawk, Cover Girl, Clutch, the Baroness, the new character Risk, Destro, Cobra Commander, and it's just action packed, and it's what you expect from G.I. Joe. It's not. I will say this: it ends on a pretty cool cliffhanger. It starts off with the G.I. Joe with Duke making the comment that the Joes need a lot of training and they're not really ready, and they end up having sort of like a training session that goes awry, and it ends up being a disaster. And then, of course, just when they're not ready, of course, that's when they're tested and they're sent on their first mission to basically protect a bunch of weapons, which of course ends up being attacked by Cobra. So it's kind of what you expect, but in all the good ways, with just absolutely, the art's really good. Kudos to the artist, Tom Riley, yeah, and Jordi Belair on the colors. It's consistent. That's one thing about the that I find with the style of all the G.I. Joe titles. It seems to have a unique feel to it, and a unique color palette on all, between Duke and this and Cobra Commander and Destro. There's a familiarity to it, and all of these characters have their own stories. And it's sort of like, what's great about it is that if you've been following all the titles leading into this, you're rewarded because you know what the characterizations and the motivations are behind the characters. For example, between Destro and Cobra Commander, you know that they have their agenda. It's a reluctant team up between the two of them. You know that they both have their own machinations toward their own agendas, but they're working together nonetheless. Baroness has her own agenda as well, but is sort of like has an uncomfortable alliance with the G.I. Joes, and you got to wonder how temporary that might be. And even Duke's motivations for leading the Joes. I mean, everything's in flux here. And then you've got this new character Risk, and Williamson's done a really good job of weaving all these characters together. And he's done a really good job, and he's earned his place here, and the reason why he's the head writer here. And it's nice to see him scripting this outside of DC Comics, because I think this is really, I've never really saw Joshua Williamson. I always saw him as sort of a B++ writer for DC. I think this G.I. Joe might very well elevate him, at least in my eyes, to legitimate A-lister. But the jury will be out on that. What about yourself? Did you check this out yourself?
Yeah, I read it. I've read all the Energon stuff, up to this point. So yeah, I was definitely in on this. I agree. Tom Riley's been killing it on the art. Jordi Belair, one of the best color artists in the business, and the color work is impactful. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't wish it was a little brighter and a little more primary. I sort of think maybe they went with more of a muted palette to, kind of differentiate it from the cartoon, because this in no shape or, no shape or form, no way, shape or form, I guess that's the phrase I'm looking for, does it feel like the cartoon at all. And Joshua Williamson's been talking about this since the beginning. Like, when it first got announced at San Diego Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and he couldn't even talk about it. Like, every time in the press room, we'd ask him a question, and, like, you could just see Robert Kirkman giving him the side eye, making sure he wasn't going to say anything. They wanted to let it build organically, and it took a couple years, and here we are. We finally have the team together. But everybody asking, hey, when's this character going to show up? When's this character going to show up? Everybody has their favorite Joes. So what surprised me with this, and it's interesting, like right up until a few days before this was released, we had a press preview that had the last 2 pages of this first issue redacted, and you couldn't see what happened on the last 2 pages. And then just this week, we were able to see. And the reason that I say that is I'm about to talk about what happens here, that cliffhanger Rocky mentioned. So if you don't want it spoiled, you might want to skip to forward about a minute. But yeah, everybody asking, hey, when's this guy going to show up? When's Storm Shadow going to show up? When's Snake Eyes going to show up? When's Chuckles? When's Shipwreck? When's Tunnel Rat? All these, everybody has their favorites. Well, you better be careful what you ask for, because apparently it's going to be like The Walking Dead, and anybody could go at any time. You never know. And in this first issue, that's Rock and Roll. That's Rock and Roll, who has been one of the main Joes in Duke and Cobra Commander and everything, Scarlet, leading up to this G.I. Joe first issue. And I don't know how you say he survived that. I mean, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 energon laser beams coming out the backside of him. I guess you could say, oh well, it missed all the vital organs. Here's one in the leg, here's one in the butt, here's a couple in the shoulder. Oh, it happened to miss his liver, went right between a couple. You know what I mean? Luckiest guy on the planet. He got shot 9 times, but it missed everything vital. I don't think Joshua Williamson does that. I think this is the end for Rock and Roll. He only lasted 1 issue. Again, granted, he's been one of the main guys and has shown up before. But the ramifications, I mean, we already saw Duke sort of, questioning whether he was going to be able to bring these different special forces people together to form a cohesive team. And General Hawk was kind of giving him advice and what have you. He's like, because Duke's like, I need to get them to act like I would act and make decisions I would make. And General Hawk's like, no, you got to get them to be the best version of themselves, because in combat, if you train them to do what you would do, in combat they're going to revert to their instincts. So you just got to make them the best versions of themselves. I imagine he's going to take this pretty hard. Rock and Roll not surviving the first mission, but yeah, just incredible. Like, holy shit, nobody is safe. So remember what I said, everybody. You're asking for your favorite Joe to show up. Be careful what you ask for, because apparently in Joshua Williamson's G.I. Joe, anybody could go at any time. So I'm surprised I haven't seen too many people talking about it on social media today. So yeah, I'm a little surprised that that's the case, that I haven't heard more people saying, "Oh my God, they killed Rock and Roll already." But I also haven't I haven't gone out there and searched on social media for. G.I.
Well,
Joe,
Robert Kirkman has that formula where he knows from The Walking Dead, and he knows from Invincible as well, that it's important to have death mean something in comics.
100%.
And he knows more than anyone. And it's actually surprising that more comic publications haven't actually made death have a little bit more meaning and permanency, although one can understand it with perhaps the big two, with the big commercial characters. But Robert Kirkman's, with G.I. Joe, they can have plenty of characters. There's plenty of cool new names for military characters, so it makes sense. There should be some sacrifice and loss.
They don't even have to
come up.
They don't even have to come up. I mean, you mentioned Risk, who seems to be like you said, a James Bond type. It was announced at San Diego Comic-Con last year. We got the character designs for the first time. He's mentioned as a new character. Yeah, they definitely can bring in new characters, but they almost don't need to, right? There's already like 300 G.I. Joe characters. So yeah, you kill one off. And Rock and Roll was one of the very first guys, and he's sort of basic when it comes to it. He's just kind of a grunt. He carries heavy ordnance or whatever. I think I don't think it's quite a 50 cal. Maybe it's an M60, but he carries more than just your standard M16 rifle. But yeah, he's not unique like, Quick Kick or Shipwreck or, some of these other guys that came, Deep Six or whatever, some of these other guys, Snow Job, these guys that came later that are a little more unique. He's just sort of a standard. So if somebody's going to die in the first issue, it makes sense that it would be somebody like that. So, I mean, Roadblock came along later, African-American character. He does have a 50 cal, but he's very similar to Rock and Roll, so maybe they'll just bring him in sooner. I don't know, but it still was surprising to see the death of a guy who'd been there from the beginning already. Anyway, up next from Mad Cave, we have the second issue of Dark Empty Void. This is written by Zach Kaplan. Chris Sheehan is the artist. Francisco Segala on colors. Agnes Poza doing the flats, and then AndWorld's Justin Birch on letters. So if you didn't listen in on the first time when I covered the first issue, we had Zach Kaplan on the show to talk about it. this idea that these scientists somewhere in Europe created a very small, very small, nearly microscopic, stable black hole, so they could study black holes and gravity and all that sort of thing. And it quickly didn't get completely out of control, but it's heading that direction. But it started growing, and they couldn't shut it down. They didn't know what to do. And in the midst of this sort of emergency, literally a woman who appeared to be human emerged from the black hole. And they were having trouble communicating with her and getting her to talk, and where did she come from and who is she and what have you. So the scientist, the second in command scientist, who is in a romantic relationship with the lead scientist, he contacts his ex-wife because she's a psychiatrist, and it's the first person that comes to mind that he can think of that can come and talk to this woman that came out of the black hole and maybe get some answers, and they can try to find out what's going on. Now, it wasn't a situation where it was a very good breakup, if you will. It was very acrimonious. It wasn't mutual. He just sort of left her, just kind of deserted her, and got in a relationship with this other scientist. And she's devastated when you meet her in the first issue. She's still like watching her wedding video and very depressed and drinking and clearly hasn't gotten over it. But she does answer the call when this guy asks her to come and talk to this woman, and she's trying to get answers and what have you. Meanwhile, the black hole continues to grow. So that's where we are in when the second issue starts. They decide to send an expedition in to the black hole with these special forces. Now, they've sent other expeditions in previously, and none of the people have returned. So they're hoping, well, we're going to send in another team, but we're going to send in that woman that came through the black hole. We're also going to send in this psychiatrist who seems to have a rapport with that woman, and we're going to try to find out what's going on. So it leans into a lot of the ideas that Zach Kaplan is well known for exploring: science fiction, mystery, drama, thriller kind of thing. I get a little bit of a sense of Arrival, that movie, that Academy Award nominated movie, written by Eric Heiser, who's also written some comics as well. So it's very much this character drama, but it's wrapped up in these sort of science fiction tropes. The art by Chris Sheehan is very well done. There's still a lot here we don't know. We don't know that much about this woman. We don't know what's going on in the black hole, because when they finally enter, they only see one of the soldiers that had gone in previously, but they see all these glowing lights, and these glowing lights appear to be eating away at the one body of the soldier that had gone in before. So clearly there's a sense of danger. What are these lights? Why do they appear to be eating through the suits? Why is this guy dead? And so they're trying to get answers. They're trying to communicate with that female that came through and get answers from her. She doesn't seem to be particularly cooperative. And then while they're in this black hole, one of their party is literally sliced in half. You can see in that panel there, and there's this like giant ethereal, almost phantom-like, looks almost like a giant moth or something. And so again, it's ratcheting up the tension. What's going on? Ratcheting up the mystery, trying to understand, what's in this black hole. What have they gotten themselves into? What does it have to do with this woman that came through? And, with the background of this psychiatrist who's supposed to be searching for answers, but has her own baggage with her relationship with her ex-husband, what the heck is going on? And while all this is happening, the woman that came through the black hole that's on this expedition with them back into the black hole disappears. And apparently she went the same direction that this ethereal, they call it a monster, went, this giant phantom moth. And so it's to be continued next issue. They'll obviously try to find where she went, find out what this monster is, get some answers. How can we shut down this black hole? Is there someone we can communicate with? Is it a door through time? Is it a door to another dimension? Like, what the heck is going on? It's Zach Kaplan at his best in my mind. There's character drama and dramatic tension, using some really crazy out there sci-fi drama as sort of a framework for it. But really, it's the character work and the fact that you start to relate to these characters and feel the claustrophobia they feel, or the tension they feel, or the urgency they feel to get answers. I go back to the very first thing he wrote, still one of my favorite things he's ever done, called Eclipse, where the sun has shifted and the radiation from the sun has become deadly. And if you get caught out in the sun, you get killed, and how that felt claustrophobic in a way as well, and dangerous to be out in daylight and what have you. Just such a great setting and great drama, and he's just a fantastic writer. So
I note that the color work is fantastic. Chris Sheehan's art is fantastic, and Francisco Segala's colors really make it. It's on pages 14 and 15 where there's this sort of like crystallized phosphorus gas, which is floating in the air. Pages 14 and 15. It looks absolutely amazing, and it's because of those two pages it really pulls. You really see how dangerous situation that these explorers are in, because it's literally in the air. It's dust particles that literally can appear to like eat life forms, and it's beautiful and terrifying at the same time, and that's a very, very hard thing to pull off artistically. But thanks to Chris Sheehan's and Francisco Segala's colors, they do a fantastic job doing it.
Yeah, again, it's sort of indicative of Zach Kaplan's work. He does choose to work with artists who have that ability to do things like that. So credit to the artist, and credit to Zach for setting up those scenes where the artist can show off, so to speak. All right, next up we have another book by Mad Cave. This one is called String. It's written by let me get to the man. I'm gonna sound like an old dude here, but I get frustrated with hey, can you put the credits on the inside of the first page? I can't even.
They're on the front page this time. On the cover. They're actually on the cover.
Well, they're on the cover, but yeah, I mean, usually there's a credits page. But anyway, Paul Tobin is the writer. Carlos Javier Olivares handles the artwork or line work. Sarah Colella on the colors. Taylor Esposito on the letters. But yeah, apparently there's no interior. I mean, this is a preview copy, so maybe. It's probably inside the front cover, which we probably don't have a scan of the front cover here. But anyway, I really enjoyed this. But give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
This was a very. This is I find such an odd premise, but yet strangely interesting. Very interesting, actually. Maybe it's just because I'm the power of this lead character. Her name is Namgung Yoon Suk, and she is basically called in to join forces with the police detective Mayfield, and it's because she's got a particular ability, and she sees strings, and hence the title of the comic is called String, and it could actually be called Strings because in fact she sees either a blue string or a black string, and they usually connect people, and when she sees a blue string connected between two people, it means that those two people have slept together. Well, okay, that's rather odd, but interesting. And there's nuances with that ability, and depending on the brightness of the blue connection, she can infer certain things about perhaps the depths of the emotions involved in that relationship, sexual or otherwise. And she can also see black strings connecting people, and if she sees black strings, it means that there's going to be a connecting the murderer and the victim. And of course, it's the black strings that are particularly interesting here. And what writer Paul Tobin does a good job in this first issue is that he sort of shows that you can imagine how uncomfortable it would be having this lead character around. I mean, if you had a friend that could, if you had any secrets, God forbid you had any secrets about who you were sleeping with, or you were in an office setting. And in fact, it even happens here where she sort of ruins one of Mayfield's relationships. One of the other officers in the office where Mayfield is actually sleeping with this other woman. She discovers inadvertently that in describing her powers, she accidentally reveals to Mayfield that the person that he was sleeping with she's actually having an affair with somebody else, because she can see these blue strings, and it's because she has that ability. She is seen as a little bit of a social outcast. She's a little bit uncomfortable to have around, so to speak. And there's scenes in an elevator where it shows that. And there are various scenes where you can tell like people are just uncomfortable around her. She's clearly somebody whose power set or abilities, psychic abilities, I don't know how you would describe that particular ability. It's obviously extremely useful, but also you can imagine that it's sort of like, I imagine the cynicism of the other officers that are utilizing her abilities, and even Mayfield, the detective Mayfield, that sort of he's a black character who they basically befriend each other, and they're investigating. They're investigating a murder or a would-be murder, and they end up chasing this. They end up literally chasing this black string in the comic. At one point, as the comic comes to an end, they're chasing this black string is sort of connected to somebody driving in this vehicle, this van with a skull on the side of it, and ultimately it leads to an individual doing a suicide bomber, and it explodes, and more mystery ensues, and then it ends on even a bigger cliffhanger because Nangung herself, Yoon Suk herself, discovers that there's a black string connected to her. So she's, it implies very strongly that the big cliffhanger is that in subsequent issues, she's going to be looking for her own murderer. Because it doesn't appear, at least what I infer from this first issue, is that it's kind of hard to avoid, if black strings are connecting people, that pretty much means doom or gloom to the person that the black string is attached to. So can she escape her own fate that she has foresaw? I guess we'll have to wait for future issues to discover that. But it's the character work here that sort of pulls me in, and she's kind of she's got the character of Namgung Young Suk. She's got pink hair. She looks like, I believe she's and I'm going by the artistic rendition, perhaps a combination. She's got Asian and Caucasian features with pink hair. She's a very unique looking female individual and attractive, but even visually, she looks a little out of place, which I find very interesting. And it works. It suits the character and her particularly odd sort of abilities. And it really works. And I really appreciated the character of Mayfield, who also seems to be cynical in his own right, but yet at the same time, he's very, he's a little uncomfortable at first with her, but they're kind of like a mismatch, but they seem to work well together. And in that case, it's kind of like a buddy sort of trope that maybe we've seen before, but I like this twist on it because these are two characters that you would not put together either as a couple or even as partners, quite frankly. And yet, oddly enough, it seems to work. They're like the odd couple of police investigation. And because of the premise, it really works well, I think, and is a really good opening issue because it establishes all the plot points. It establishes our lead characters. It establishes the mystery and, of course, the central dilemma, which is on the final page when she sees the black string connecting to herself, but she doesn't know where the other end is. And therein lies the ultimate mystery and a hell of a cliffhanger. And I thought it was really well done. What about yourself?
Well, the question I have to ask you, Rocky, you notoriously dislike characters with pink hair, but you seem to like her. So, yeah.
Well, hey, man, there's always a first time. What can I say? I mean, a good writing and good characterization will always pull me back.
Yeah, so I found it really interesting as well. Like you said, great character work. Both the main characters here are very quirky. They seem like, you use the term odd couple. They seem like a very odd couple. And you wouldn't necessarily assume they would get along, but they do, and it's because of that, that quirkiness, I think, that they kind of see in each other, a strangeness, and so, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a blue string connecting them at one point. But for now, she's got to deal with this black string. And what's interesting, you mentioned solving her own murder, and she's like, the black string shows up at the end. Like, why do I have a black string? What the fuck? My first thought wasn't that someone's trying to kill her. My first thought was, oh, who is she going to kill? So, I mean, it's a black string.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point. Where does it start? Where does it end?
Yeah. How does she know? It hasn't really been addressed. How do you know?
That's a good point.
If it's a blue string, the people slept together, whatever, who, I guess you could wonder who instigated. But when it's a black string, how do you know who the victim is and who who's the perpetrator or whatever? So that's interesting. So I mean, you could be right. I guess it would seem to make more sense, a little more tropey, right? Like,
but I like your idea better. It actually subverts expectations a little bit. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it I thought of that, and then I thought of Minority Report, right? Because this has a little bit in common with that, the Philip K. Dick original short story, whatever, the Tom Cruise movie, where murders were predicted or whatever, and the psychics could see, and that was sort of the same thing that they. The whole central conceit of the movie, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it, everybody, sorry. But yeah, they basically, one of the psychics has a vision that Tom Cruise kills somebody, and he's the head of this this future crime division, and why would he ever kill somebody, or whatever. And then as the movie plays out, he is there. The guy shoots himself, but it looks like Tom Cruise did it or whatever. So you kind of wonder this sort of thing, like, is she solving her own murder, or is somebody framing her for murder? How does that work? Would she still see a black string if somebody's framing her? I mean, it makes more sense to think, someone's after her and she's going to have to solve it before it happens. But the other thing that I wanted to comment on that you mentioned was this idea of people being uncomfortable around her, that feels very, very real. And it's brilliantly illustrated on this page by Carlos Oliveras here, where, she gets out of the elevator, at the police precinct. These police detectives know her, know what she's capable of, with the exception of the new detective that she meets and partners up with. And you see how many people are in the first panel, and then the second panel, and then the third panel, they're gone. They have disappeared. I don't want to be inside of this woman. I don't want her to, know if I've done anything bad. Obviously, if you've murdered somebody, you don't want her to be able to tell that you've done that. You don't want, your secret, intimate relationships to be revealed or whatever. They just disappear. Nobody wants to be around this woman if you know what her abilities are. So, fantastic work. I think the artwork is great. The color work by Sarah Colello is fantastic as well. So I did reach out to Paul Tobin about having him come on the show to talk about it, but we just couldn't make it work with our schedules. But ideally, we're going to have him come on before the second issue comes out, and we'll be able to talk very spoilery about the first issue and tease what's coming up in issue number 2. I'll try to make that work if possible. We'll see. Okay, next up, another book from Image. This is Rifters. I talked about the previous issue. This is issue number 6. I think it's the final issue of the series. It's written by Brian Posen and Joe Troman. Chris Johnson is the artist, Mark Englert on colors, Joe Sabino on letters. It's a very fun story by these two writers about these rifters. They're effectively time cops, and they've been trying to find this person who's been going through time and murdering people to set time right, so to speak. That, in her mind, she's killing people that deserve to be killed. In the mind of the rifters, she's killing people and trying to change history, which, is what they're supposed to stop. So it all comes to a head in this particular issue. And there's a lot of humor here and a lot of like potty jokes and what have you. There's buddy cop. There's the whole science fiction trope of time travel as well. But there's a lot of humor, and it's really interesting. So what happens in this particular issue is they find out that this woman is working for this former senator, and he's really sort of the power behind the throne, if you will. He's the one that's sending this woman out there. She's sort of his hitman, if you will, to basically kill certain people so that he'll rise to power. He'll be in charge of time travel, and he's sort of just power hungry, right? Like, he's going to set things up so he'll basically rule the world. And in his mind, he's doing the Lord's work because he's a good guy and he has the best interests of everybody at heart. Yeah, dude, except for all the people you're killing. But, in his mind, it's kind of like a Dr. Doom, right? Like, yeah, sorry, I'm going to make an omelet, so I got to break some eggs. But in the end, everybody will be better off. I'm going to create this utopia or what have you. But come to find out, this woman has actually been a plant. She's been an agent that's actually meant to be working against him this entire time. And when she betrays him, he calls in, his personal guard, and there's this giant fight where it brings in other rifters, other time cops, if you will. and they all sort of have to work together. And in the end, this guy is defeated, although not everybody survives. And you get the sense at the end that the story's not over, because it even says Volume 1 available March 2025. But it probably depends on how that, obviously how the individual issues sell, but probably how the trade sells as well. Because with what these time cops that came to the rescue of the two buddies, they sort of broke the rules to do it. Obviously, the two buddies, they got fired from the time cop precinct or whatever. They lost their privileges to be time cops, last issue because of what they were doing. So it sort of sets it up like if they continue, they'll be sort of out on their own, not necessarily working for the Rifter organization. But are there still people out there that need to be stopped? Like, there's a lot of questions still to be answered. But if there's not more, this does stand on its own as a really fun story. The art's energetic. It's not the brightest colored book, but the color palette suits the tone of the story that's being told. So it's a lot of fun. I do recommend it. Brian Posen, he's writing grommets with Rick Remender as well. And a lot of people will know him as Bert from The Big Bang Theory. He's an actor and a comedian as well. So if you're like, why does that name sound familiar? That's why. He always makes fun because nobody knows his name, but when you see his face, you're like, oh yeah, I know that guy, because he's been in tons of sitcoms. He'll show up for an episode or two, just whatever, delivery guy or mailman or whatever, that sort of thing. So a lot of people know his face, might not necessarily know his name, but he's a big comic book fan. I think he did a good job. Obviously, his sense of humor, shows through here and what have you. I wouldn't say this rises to the level of grommets in terms of quality, but I don't think it's necessarily supposed to. It's a book that doesn't take itself too seriously, as opposed to grommets, which also has humor, but a little more emotion, a little more heart. This is a little more kind of bubblegum, entertainment, if you will, but still an excellent read. All right, let's move on. Talk about the next book on Rocky's list. I'm gonna have to. I don't. Maybe that. But it's Big Burn number 2. Hope you guys all had a chance to check out my interview with Joe Henderson when he came on to talk about this book. Basically, the premise is these two bank robbers fall in love. They meet literally while robbing a bank, and they have a very successful career robbing banks. But eventually, they get caught. And while they're in the back of the police wagon on their way to the police station after getting caught that initial time, the devil shows up. Literally, the devil himself, Satan himself, shows up and offers them their freedom for their souls. And they take him up on the offer, but unbeknownst to them, if you don't have your soul, you can't. You have no emotions, you have no feelings. So they've literally sacrificed their love for each other because of giving up their soul. So in the first issue, the woman ends up in a insane asylum because she's not able to function without her emotions, and her boyfriend, who is in debt to some loan sharks for quite a bit. The loan sharks enforcers show up and they kill him, and he goes to hell, and he finds out hell's a casino because the devil loves that these people get that close to thinking they can get out from under whatever their bad situation is, and right when they're about to get out, he yanks the rug under from they crap out or whatever, and he's like, what's worse than that? Thinking you're about to get out of your horrible situation and being pulled right back in. But the other thing is this guy finds out all the souls are stored in a vault in hell. So he's a guy that runs heists along with his girlfriend. So what better way to get their souls back than to plan a heist to enter hell and steal their souls back? So that's what we learned in the first issue, and this issue picks up where that left off. So give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
This takes the whole idea of a heist. It takes all the tropes of a heist and all the wonderful ways, and it weaves it ramps the plot lines up a little bit, because with every heist, when you put just like the A-Team always said, Hannibal and the A-Team said, I love it when a plan comes together. Well, in the best heist films, it's always better when the plan goes awry. Everybody has a plan until somebody gets punched in the face, as Tyson would say. And in this case, the boyfriend, you talked about the boyfriend, his name's Owen. Owen went to hell. He comes back, he discovers all this about hell, and he figures, well, he tells his he puts together a team. So when Owen comes back from hell, he talks to his girlfriend Carly, and they both basically gave up their souls to the devil, and they want to plan a heist to basically go to hell, break out and free all the souls, and the ultimate heist. Well, of course, you can imagine what the hell you have to do that. First of all, you got to put a team together, and second of all your team members, they have to have a particular skill set, and you all have to die, and then go to hell, and then somehow figure a way to come back. Well, you're going to have to come up with a plan. That's a hell of a plan. And what's interesting about this particular issue is that this entire issue isn't really, this issue here involves, most of this issue involves Owen and his crew, Owen, Diego, and a guy named Harold, trying to break Carly out of the mental institution, basically, and that's essentially what they accomplished to do. But what writer Joe Henderson does so masterfully, with great art by Lee Garbett, is he orchestrates a scenario where you get to know these characters, and in particular, one of the ways. In order to, when you first get to hell, you're sort of under like a kind of spell. When you wake up after you die, you wake up and you're kind of in a spell. And in order to snap out of that sort of dream you're in, you gotta learn how to lucid dream in real life, and you gotta learn to somehow, so that they've got to train for this. Well, so as Owen and Harold and Diego are sort of figuring out how they're going to plan this, they realize that the best person that they need Carly out, because Carly's the best at planning this, and so that's what they do. And as the story progresses, you learn something about the characters, the secrets of Diego, the secrets that they have. That these are bad. These are bad men, and in particular, Harold is particularly bad. And Harold himself is a character that is he's a sociopath. And as the story proceeds, it's very comedic. Carly goes through her own therapy while she's incarcerated, and she comes to believe that it was all in her head, that there's no such thing as the devil. Clearly, she must have been delusional thinking that. And of course, meanwhile, Owen, when they finally get to her to break her out, she decides that, oh no, it's all nonsense. She doesn't even want to be broken out. And I mean, all of this ensues in this issue. But they finally, through a lot of machinations, through great dialogue, through great rapport back and forth, through getting to know this hints at the inner demons of some of these characters, which undoubtedly will play a role once they're in hell. Because how the hell are they going to get out? Because remember, if they're candidates to go to hell, they probably have some skeletons in their closet, but they don't really trust each other. They don't want to reveal what those secrets are. And so, so as this story progresses and they've escaped with Carly and they're being chased, they end up, through a hilarious scene, they end up sacrificing the one character, Harold, who, unbeknownst to the rest of the team, he actually killed one of the guards because in a very sociopathic, heartless manner. And they escape, and flash forward a couple days, Carly has a master plan on how to essentially have all of them die, go to hell, and even has a plan on how to get back from hell after they release all the souls. We don't know what it is, but the real kicker is it ends on such a great cliffhanger, because the one sociopath who is a member of their team, Harold, who dies, he ends up in hell anyway, and he confronts the devil, and the devil doesn't know about the heist. The devil doesn't know what the plan is, but the devil, Harold, is going to betray the team, it appears, and likely tell the devil what Owen and Carly have planned. And so this is something. I mean, imagine if you want to rob a bank and the bank manager knows you're going to rob him, except the bank manager is the devil and protecting a vault of souls. It seems to me that right up, this ends on such an amazing cliffhanger, because you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, the team is screwed. Carly and Owen and Diego, they're screwed. There's no way they're going to be able to pull this off. If the devil knows you're coming, how can you be successful? How are they going to do this? And so it's a hell of a cliffhanger. It was just fantastic. And it's just I'm just so looking forward to the third issue. But this is so well done. Kudos to writer Joe Henderson. I honestly, I actually kind of, and the funny thing is, I kind of even saw the ending coming, because I thought. At first, I thought, did they deliberately kill Harold? Because if they kill Harold, isn't he going to end up in hell anyway? I really thought that was foolish of them, because they sacrificed Harold's life in order to escape, and they didn't like Harold very much. But it's like they weren't thinking. That was a pretty foolish mistake, because if you kill each other, and the person you killed ends up in hell, of course they're going to spill the beans to the devil, and that's what Harold does here. And it just goes to show you that every plan goes awry in some, even the best laid plans, but just really well done, and high recommend for me, this series. I strongly recommend that people, if you're not going to buy these individual issues of Big Burn, the first two issues, certainly get it in hardcover form, because the one thing that Distillery has, fantastic, they have their work always comes out in beautiful hardcover form. They always in collected editions when the series are over. But I quite enjoyed this issue. What about yourself?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. I'm a big fan of Joe Henderson's work. Working with Lee Garbett, working with colorist Lee Luffridge, letterer Lucas Catoni. They're just a fantastic team. The first thing they did together, Skyward, was Eisner nominated. Shadecraft, their second series, wasn't quite as well received, but I thought it was excellent as well. And they have another series coming that's kind of in that vein. In the meantime, they're doing this, Big Burn. The artwork is fantastic from Lee Garbett and Lee Luffridge. It's an awesome premise. I mean, this idea that you're going to go into hell and steal back your own souls, but the challenges therein, right? Like you mentioned it, you've got to kill yourself. You've got to make sure you can lucid dream so you can wake yourself up from whatever horrible thing that they're going to present you with that got you there. But the other part of this is, like, you can't just go and recruit the best safecracker or the best this or the best that, because no one's going to agree to do it unless they've already sold their soul. So not only do they have to get somebody who, is really good and going to be a useful part of the team, it's got to be somebody who has the vested interest of going back to steal their own soul. If Harold's demise had happened later, you would have thought, well, that's all part of Carly's plan. I would think Carly's smart enough, like you said, to know, hey, we killed Harold. He's going to end up in hell. He's probably going to tell, the devil what we're up to. We can use that to our advantage. Heists are very hard to write. They're very hard to write because you have to be clever, and you don't want it to be too predictable. So, Joe and I talked about that when we had him on the show. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. So we'll see how it plays out. Absolutely gorgeous artwork, and really excited to see how it plays out going forward. So we'll have to wait and see when the next issue comes out how that all plays out with Harold's betrayal and what have you. So okay, next up for me, another title from Mad Cave, written by Mark London, art by Carlos Reno. Zhao Canola on colors, Dave Stewart on letters. Revolution 9 with Velveteen. The first issue, we met her. We learned that she's kind of this enforcer for this secret kind of Illuminati group that is looking to control the world through upheaval and chaos and revolution. Thus the name, Revolution 9. She's their ninth agent or what have you. But like a lot of secret cabals with their crazy conspiracies and things that they're up to, and they've hid the truth from her. They've lied to her. Those lies are coming to light, and she's kind of rebelling against them. And instead of killing the latest person she was sent to kill, instead she rescues him because she's come to believe that he has knowledge of her parents and her sister and different things that this cabal has kept from her over the years. So it's very much almost this espionage spy thriller, world hopping, jumping from place to place globally story. The art is fantastic. The action is nonstop, and it really feels like it's just getting started. There's a lot that we don't know yet about this the shadowy cabal and what they're up to. There's a lot that we don't know about Velveteen yet, but what we do know is she's a complete badass, And these action scenes are just amazing, whether she's fighting hand to hand or with a knife or with a weapon or what have you. Yeah, she's tough to handle. I mean, she's outmanned and outgunned, and she still seems to be getting the upper hand on these guys. So again, we'll see how that plays out. This Revolution 9 is part of the Underworld universe that Mad Cave is building up to a crossover event next year with Hour of the Wolf and Exit City. So again, just a lot of fun. It's a relatively quick read because there's so much action. But yeah, the art is gorgeous. I'm just a big fan of Mad Cave these days and what they're doing. Can't wait to see what happens next in that particular book. So yeah, if you're so inclined, check it out. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's one of these situations with that Underworld universe that Mad Cave's building. It's like, just when I think I can tell you which of those three titles is my favorite, then like the next issue comes out for any particular title. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that one's my favorite. Like I thought Revolution 9 was my favorite, and then Hour of the Wolf came out. I was like, maybe I like that one more. And then Exit City came out. I'm like, oh well, that's my favorite. And now Revolution 9 issue 2 came out. And I'm like, well, maybe it is Revolution 9. So I think my favorite of the Underworld universe titles is whatever one had the latest issue come out, because they keep surprising me and they're absolutely fantastic. So, all right, up next we have pivoting back to Distillery. We have Life, issue number 2. This is from writers Brian Azzarello and Stephanie Phillips. We have Daniel Zalej on art. We have Lee Luffridge handling the colors, and Jared K. Fletcher on letters and design. This is a flip book, which makes it a little hard to show graphics for everybody, because like you pick up the front and you read it, and you're reading about the prose, but then and easy to do when you pick it up as a flip book, because then you just flip it over and you start from the back cover and you read it. But when we go and we're checking it out from a digital perspective, I got to go to the last page and then scroll backwards to give the con side, if you will. So yeah, it is a little bit challenging. Clearly a first world problem, but this is a really interesting story. Give us your thoughts on it, Rocky.
Well, I really like I love the premise of this, because it deals with there's so many there's a number of built-in ironies of this story. I mean, basically imagine a prison planet, hundreds of millions of light years away. Prisoners are sent there from Earth. Flash forward 276 years after these prisoners are there, they're forgotten about. But there's a group of essentially of people from Earth who basically are thieves, basically. A little bit of corruption there, and they're the pros, and they want to travel to this planet because people have forgotten about this former prison planet. But there's basically diamonds to mine on this prison planet. There's diamonds. There's a stash. There's potential wealth there that has been forgotten about. But what's also forgotten about are prisoners, and the prisoners aren't dead, because the prisoners, when they're sent to this planet, and I'm oversimplifying the plot here, but just bear with me, they were sort of experimented upon with experiments of longevity and what have you, and the prisoners that were sent there, they weren't exactly the best of the best. There was at least one of the prisoners sent there was the Casanova killer. He's known as CJ in the story. He was sentenced to like 32 life sentences. One was another guy by the name of Forrest Snow. He was a terrorist as well. And meanwhile, this team, led by a character named Jax and her boyfriend Bobby, along with another character Caddy, and another with a sort of a celebrity character named Queen Jesus, and a corrupt ex-cop named Kennedy. They're the pros that go to this planet to basically essentially rob it, to find the stash. And they're stunned to surprise in the first 2 issues. They're stunned to surprise that some people are still alive, and there's humans that are still alive, and they're not exactly, they feel that maybe they're not exactly human, but they're human enough that there's a problem. And where it really excels here is the character work, because we've got the pros, which are corrupt, because they have an agenda and they want to rob this planet. Meanwhile, the people on the planet, the diamonds that the pros want to steal to take back to Earth. And Earth is kind of is not exactly a great place to live anymore. They want to steal the diamonds. Well, you can imagine the prisoners on this planet, the diamonds are worthless to them. They just want to escape. They want to get off. So the irony here is that what is virtually worthless to the prisoners, they just want their freedom. They want to escape, is something that the people that are coming there, the pros want the diamonds and the prisoners just want off the island. So you would think that this would be a fairly easy compromise by any metric to negotiate, right? I mean, you want the diamonds here, take the diamonds, just get me off this pile of rock. But of course, we're not, of course, it doesn't work that way. We're dealing with, criminals who've had 276 years to have their brain sort of rotted and to have their own sort of frustrations build up over that period of time. They've created their own culture, their own status, their own sort of class society on this planet. And I mean, the very concept, that the name of the title itself, Life. Brian Azzarello teams up with Stephanie Phillips. They do a really great job here with Daniel Zizelge on the art, Lee Loridge on the covers. There's a really good job here of just developing these themes and just as I said, I just find it so ironic that the motivations of the pros versus the cons, and in many ways, on the surface, it seems like this sounds like the perfect compromise. I mean, you're trapped on a planet for centuries, and diamonds are useless to you. And if you knew that these useless diamonds to you, you could give them away to escape. I mean, it would seem to me to be an even trade. But of course, there's corruption, there's betrayals, and there's agendas on the pros that are there. And of course, there's mistakes that are made, accidental. The cons accidentally killed attacked one of the members of the crew of the pros in the opening issue, and that leads, of course, to a misunderstanding. And of course, how do you communicate and compromise and find peace? And then ultimately, how is this going to resolve? Is it going to resolve? And more specifically, is there even a Earth worth going back to? And I really like the themes that Brian Azzarello is so adept at dealing with darker themes. I remember he did a series for Vertigo called Loveless, which was a dark Western tale about a Western town that had a very gloomy and dystopian ending. But it's always sort of stuck with me. And even his 100 Bullets had sort of a darker tone to it, exploring all kinds of themes. This is right up Azzarello's alley. And one great thing about Stephanie Phillips, she brings her own sort of like fighting mentality to it, because you really see, I think, Stephanie Phillips' personality manifested and her sensibilities manifested in the character, in particular of Jax and Caddy. It works really well, and this is again another high recommend for me. I don't know why Distillery isn't given more attention, quite frankly, in the independent comic book media, because I think it deserves it. It's undoubtedly because there's so much competition out there. But Distillery, say what you will about it, it's quality after quality. Qualitative work after qualitative work, and it deserves more attention. And this title as well is just another one that's just right up there with me. So I quite enjoyed this. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, this idea to tell the same story, about this heist, which it's not a heist story even the way that that Big Burn is, but to tell it from two different perspectives, right? Because as you mentioned, yeah, there's these diamonds on this planet that are completely worthless to the prisoners. They don't care. And maybe if they ever even did at some point, they certainly don't anymore. And we'll talk about, why that might be in a second. But it's everything to the guys that have gone. It's everything to the pros that have gone there to try to find out. So just the initial concept and the way that it's a flip book, and the different perspectives we're getting is so awesome. So, I had talked to Brian. I talked to Brian and Stephanie about having them on, and again, due to scheduling, we just couldn't make it work. Because I was curious, so is one of them writing, one side more than the other? Or is it easier for one to write, one perspective versus the other? Or they're writing them together? I'm really curious about that. But the other aspect of this that we didn't mention, so we talk about this prison planet, and this is something that the pros discover in this particular issue after they examine one of the cons that they think that they kill, and then turns out they don't, because these cons have the ability to regenerate. and they discover, hey, so it was this guy. He was a trillionaire, and he was trying to make money off the penal system, and they created this way to extend human life. So if you have a sentence that's 32 life sentences, then you're going to have 32 lives. Like, you're not going to die. You're going to, go to this planet and live until you've served out all the sentences, because that's true justice or what have you. So it's this idea that the prisoners, and the pros are looking at the cons going, are they even human anymore? Because when you live that long, like, your body just is going to mutate, like they're like cancer, but it's not anything that's going to kill you. So you get these tumors, you get these weird growths or whatever, just through having such a long life, when humans aren't, supposed to live that long. And kind of to that point, they say they make note of the fact that this trillionaire, who was into all these longevity studies and owned this penal colony and did all these things, he allowed himself to die in his late 80s. He didn't prolong his life, probably because they couldn't find a way to do it in such a way that it would make living longer than one lifetime worth it, right? I mean, that says a lot. So it's not even just that these diamonds are useless to these prisoners because they're just stuck on this planet and all they want to do is get off, but it's like, not only have their bodies changed, but their way of thinking has been warped as well. So it's not just the bodies that are sort of this warped version of what a human body is. Their value systems, their personalities, their social interactions, everything has become warped by these incredibly unnatural long lives that they've lived. And that's another aspect of it that's really interesting as well. So yeah, fantastic work. I can't think of two more talented writers to be writing this. I agree with you about Distillery. I don't know, maybe it's the fact that their stuff is sold digitally in a different way than most comics are, which is good and bad. It's good in that it's not easy to pirate. You can't pirate Distillery stuff the way a lot of other people pirate it just because of the nature of it. And at the same time, you can go and buy a digital copy and you can sell it. You own that digital copy and you can sell that digital copy. It's different. It's different than the way a lot of other books are available. But because of that, I don't know, maybe fewer people are reading it. I know, as bad as it is, that there's still a lot of people that they pirate books because they either can't afford it or they're lazy or they're just not very good people and they like to steal. I don't know. Can't speak to that, but I feel like that's part of the reason. It's sort of the same thing as a Bad Idea in a way, how there's not readily available digital copies. So I think that does factor into it. But you're right. I mean, these books are awesome, and more people should be reading them, and more people should be talking about them because they are really, really fantastic. So, all right, next up for me is Domain. So this one's really interesting. This is basically the book that in Chip Zdarsky's Public Domain comic, the book that they write is Domain, which is this book. So this is like a comic within a comic, and now we're getting kind of the story that's being told. So this is the final. Whoops! Did I accidentally close it? Are you kidding me? Sorry, everybody. So this is the book within the book of the story that's being told. With these characters that are basically sharing the power of the domain. And this is the final issue. It's written by Chip Zdarsky. Rachel Stott handles the art. Aaron Angiolini on colors. Lettering designed by Jeff Powell. I don't want to say it's simplistic. That's the wrong word. But it's a very straightforward story about these aliens coming to Earth with the domain, which are these sort of these gauntlets or bracelets that you can put on, and you gain power, and basically these three friends are sharing the gauntlets, and so they're sharing the power between them, but only one of them can have the power at a time, so that creates an interesting dynamic as well. And then these pirates show up and they want the gauntlets for themselves, and then in this particular issue, the champion of the domain themselves shows up to get the bracelets back. So it's a very straightforward story talking about aliens and alien technology. While these three are trying to share it. But it makes sense that it would be really straightforward because, like I said, it's a sort of a comic from within another comic. And what's really interesting, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is fun, and it is straightforward, and I would recommend it for younger readers. Plus, it adds context to the Public Domain story, which I think is really excellent and very meta. But the other thing that's interesting is once these three friends that are sharing the power of the domain are able to repair the alien invasion, they know that they can't stay on Earth, which is interesting because so often it's like, oh, you get these superpowers and you become a superhero and you're fine and whatever, and everybody forgets that, man, if people with powers really manifested themselves like in our world, you know what would happen? The governments of the world would swoop in, it doesn't matter who it is, U.S. or Canada or Israel or whatever, and they would take you and they would put you in a deep dark hole somewhere and study you for the rest of your life. You wouldn't have a life anymore. You know, they would want to find out how to weaponize it, how to make sure you, excuse me, weren't a threat to the rest of civilization, humanity, whatever. And that is very real. That is very realistic. And these three people realize this, and so in the end, they leave with the alien that they got the devices from to begin with, who sort of befriended them and sort of betrayed the champion of the domain because he felt like these humans were going to get killed unfairly. None of this was their fault, the fact that the ship crash landed on Earth or what have you. So they all fly off into space. And so I imagine if there's going to be more domain, it's going to be like fish out of water with these three, still sharing powers out there in the very dangerous place that is the universe of the domain away from planet Earth. So that's really interesting as well, and we'll see how that all plays out going forward if there's more of this domain story. So yeah, again, not a book I've heard a lot of people talking about, but I think it's a lot of fun, and if you're so inclined, yeah, definitely check it out. All right, up next we have another title from let me get it on the screen. Another title from Distillery. Again, from Chip Zdarsky, really fantastic story. It's called Time Waits, and it's about this guy who was sent back in time from a somewhat dystopian future to procure these seeds for vegetation to grow food that was like resistant to disease and insects and all that sort of thing. Because in the future, there's a food shortage, and somehow these seeds got lost or what have you. And so this particular company that has the ability to send people back in time wants the seeds for themselves because it will basically make them rulers of the world. That's how important it is to be able to be the one that's providing food to everybody. I mean, you can't live without food, right? So they know they'll become extremely rich and very powerful if they have these seeds. So they're sent back to retrieve them. And one of the guys, when he goes back, has a bit of a change of heart because there's other people on his team that are out there, like literally killing for these seeds, and he doesn't feel that that's appropriate. So that was all kind of the setup in the first issue. What we're told in the second issue here at the beginning is they're only supposed to time travel back every 15 years because it takes so much energy and so much resources and it's so expensive. But his former partner, one of the guys that went back with him originally that he betrayed, has convinced the powers that be on the board of directors to send him back sooner than that. And meanwhile, this guy has begun this relationship with the sheriff of the small town that he's sort of settled in. They're talking about adopting a kid, so there's a family feel to it as well. But he's under the gun as they keep sending back more teams and more teams, and so he fights them off along with the help of his wife, and then he thinks he has time, right? Because it's supposed to be 15 years, but it's not, because the guy that he betrayed has managed to convince the board of directors that, hey, this isn't as important as it ever has been to go back and stop this guy. So he even gives them the seeds. He sends back one of the soldiers, time-traveling soldiers that comes back to get him. He tucks the seeds in his pocket and sends the guy back. And that's not even enough to stop this guy, because this guy just wants revenge on Blue, is the character's name, who went back and stayed back in time and what have you. So again, it's one of the things that Zdarsky's really good at, is the character drama and the relationships and what have you. It's only 3 issues. This is the second of 3 issues. It's relatively fast-paced. It's not one of those situations where it's moving slowly and every single aspect of time travel is explained and this and that and what have you. But one of the things that is talked about is the fact you can't change the past, which gives freedom to the people that go back to the past to basically kill whoever they want to kill. But the past has already happened, so it's not like if you go back and kill your grandfather, you cease to exist. So it really ramps up the stakes. for Blue and his wife and potential adopted son, because these guys can go back and kill whoever they want. They don't have to worry about changing time. So it really, as I said, ramps up the stakes and makes for a fun story. I'm really curious how this all plays out. Again, just an excellent story, great dialogue, fast-paced. Another one of those books from Distillery. To your point earlier, Rocky, like why do I not see people talking about this? It's like, and time travel stories can be tough, right? Because you do fall into those tropes, like, hey, well, if you go back and do this, and it would change this or whatever. I mean, we're told right off the bat, it doesn't matter. The past has happened; it's immutable. You can't change anything. And again, ramping up those stakes, it makes it so interesting and more dangerous. It's really fantastic. So yeah, why aren't more people talking about this? I don't know. It's a fantastic story, a lot of fun, great art, as you can see here, with both the action and the drama. So written by Chip Zdarsky, as I said, along with David Brothers, who is a writer who I have tried to get contact information for, because I've read stuff from him before that I've really enjoyed. I might have to try to reach out to him through Distillery to see if I can get him on the show, because he seems to be really talented. I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing his name more and more. Marcus Toe and Marvin Sinapar handle the art. They do a fantastic job as well, because there is a lot of emotion here, both in terms of Blue and with him trying to save his newfound family, with their potential adopted son and what he's up against, with their friend Baker, who's a baker, which is kind of funny. Colors by the very talented Matt Wilson, lettered by Ariana Mayer. Like, it's just a really quality book. And I go back to the point you were making earlier about, I don't understand why more of these Distillery books aren't being talked about, because they're really quite good. So anyway, quickly talking about the next book that's on my list. It's part of the Spawn universe for Todd McFarlane. It's Rat City, number 7. This is written by Erica Schultz. Jay Carlos handles the art. J. David Ramos on colors. Erica herself handles the lettering. A bit of a transitional issue. If you haven't been reading Rat City, this is the first time that we've had a Hellspawn who's not dead. Instead, the bomb that went off in Spawn issue 100 and reverberated through time gave this character Hellspawn-like abilities, but he's still trying to figure out what that means and why, because he has his own abilities, because in the future, he was a Special Forces soldier, but on a mission, he lost, I think it was both his legs, so he already has these cybernetic enhancements, along with a bunch of other members of the Special Forces and military have in this world, but the corporation that's in charge of all that, of giving these cybernetic prosthetics and what have you, is very corrupt. And so they're trying to get back their technology and try to understand the Hellspawn aspect of this character. So really fantastic. It's a very, very different take on Spawn. Erica Schultz is an underrated writer in my mind. You can see the art by Jay Carlos. A lot of big panels, but not a lot of detail. So it gives it this sort of really clean feel, which sort of suits the story, but at times I wish there was a little bit more detail in there, but it's a nitpick. But it's also relatively fast-paced and makes for a relatively quick read. I mean, we're 7 issues in here, but I feel like we're just kind of getting started. But the good thing is, if you haven't been reading this at all, you're going to get a big chunk of story, if you jump on and check it out. And it's selling really, really well. And Todd's been a big proponent of it, obviously. So Thomas Healy, who's the editor-in-chief over there at Todd McFarlane Productions, been doing a fantastic job recruiting talent. So if you want kind of a different take on Spawn, I do recommend it. Like I said, it's been pretty popular among the Spawn community. So if you're so inclined, I would say definitely check it out. Have you read any of the Rat City issues, Rocky?
No, I haven't. I just haven't had.
Yeah.
I'd like to. I just haven't had time.
Yeah, there's so many fantastic books, like I was saying. Next up, briefly, I'll talk about Huge Detective. We had Adam Rose on to talk about the first issue before it started. He's the writer. Magenta King is the artist. Colors by King and Minimone. and letters by DC Hopkins. So this is a story of a future Earth where these huge, as they're called, this new species that's actually a really old species that were dormant and hibernating under Australia emerge. There's a bit of a war between humans and huge, and they come to an understanding because they know if they keep fighting, they're going to ruin the planet, and nobody wins at that point. So they've come to this understanding. Humans leave them the colony of Australia, the huge, in order to get some of the harder and more rare things that they need that humans make, agree to be a transportation system for humans, which is like faster than airplanes and what have you. Like, we're told they could walk across the Atlantic Ocean in like 32 steps. So imagine if you could get to from New York to Paris in the time it takes you to take 32 steps, right? So it's really, really cool. But there's also this agreement that humans won't set foot on Australia and the huge won't set foot anywhere else. But what's happening is, in the story, is there are huge that are have disappeared, and there are humans that are have shown up as being murdered, and there's hints that the huge are behind it. So it's very much a procedural between this huge detective who's teamed up with this FBI agent who apparently has some sort of disease, some terminal illness that we haven't learned a lot about yet. And this huge detective, they're teaming up and they're trying to solve the crime. Meanwhile, this guy in orange here is a human but thinks he's a huge, and has some sort of connection to the huge detective. Because the other thing about the huge is they communicate telepathically between each other. They have the capability of speaking, but they don't like it. It hurts their vocal cords. But when they communicate with humans normally, that's what they do. They speak. But this guy somehow thinks he's a huge, but appears to be human because he's small like a human, but somehow is receiving the thoughts of the huge detective. So there's a lot of mystery, a lot of, not sure what's going on, but it's really intriguing. The art by Magenta King, as you can see, is very textured, very interesting. And yeah, it's an underrated title from Titan Comics. Again, a book I don't hear a lot of people talking about, but I think Adam Rose is super talented, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing his name more and more. So check this out if you're so inclined. If you like things like Law and Order, those type of police procedurals, or if you're a fan of mystery, murder mysteries and that sort of thing, I definitely recommend you checking this out. The art's fantastic, the color work, very unique. And yeah, just a really, really interesting premise. The whole, fish out of water, and we talked earlier about, odd partners in string. We talked about odd partners last week when we talked about Exit City. These could be the two oddest partners of all when it comes to detectives that have to work together. I mean, they're not even the same species. So yeah, really, really fantastic book. All right, up next from Skybound, the Energon universe, we have the latest issue of Transformers. This is sort of continuing the last issue when we had the origin of Starscream. So that gives context for this story where we see Starscream. He's now half Hiss Tank and half Starscream for now. And he's sort of getting the Decepticons that are left on Earth to sort of regroup. He's clearly going to be the leader. Megatron has not returned yet from wherever he has been. And it really showcases who Starscream is and how he's been corrupted over time by the Decepticons, by Megatron, and it's sort of sad and tragic in a way. The art by, I guess I should give the credits. Did I skip over the credits page? Yeah, I sure did. Here I'm complaining sometimes the credit page is not there, and then I skip over it when it's there. Written by Daniel Warren Johnson, Jason Howard handling the art in this issue, Mike Spicer on colors, Russ Wooten on letters. So yeah, as I said, Starscream basically regrouping the dead Decepticons that are on Earth so they can take the fight to the Transformers. They feel very betrayed by Shockwave. Megatron is gone as far as they know. But yeah, these guys are despicable and disgusting, and have no respect for life, which is sort of just so antithetical to what we've seen from the Transformers so far. So continuing Daniel Warren Johnson's excellent run on Transformers, that I think really captures the feel of the cartoon, where this is a very black and white, white hats and black hats, very two-dimensional in terms. There's not a lot of gray area when it comes to most of the Transformers, but introducing some adult themes in terms of, we get context for why Starscream is like this. So I think that's really important, and it kind of informs why he's the way he is. And although you don't agree with the choices he makes, like a lot of the best villains, you can understand why he's making them. You know, it's years of being around Megatron and being, you know, treated badly and that sort of thing. So action-packed. There's a reason that Transformers is selling really, really well. The art suits the book very, very well. Also, it's going to be interesting when Daniel Warren Johnson leaves the book to see how different it feels without him at the helm, since he's been the one that's that launched the title since the beginning of its return, and he's just been doing an excellent job on it the entire time. So, and I think that's it. I'm just bear with me here. I'm clicking through and make sure that I didn't skip any of the titles that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, just a really great week for indie comics. You know, Rocky and I have talked about it a lot, about how indie is sort of the most exciting places where stories are being told right now. And yeah, I definitely think this week is definitely an example of that. Oh, there is one more book that I wanted to talk about. I'm glad I clicked through here, because we also have the first issue of Arcbound from Dark Horse Comics, which is written by Scott Snyder and Frank Thierry, from character development with Tom Hardy, who you know, people are going to know that name. Tom Hardy played Bane in the Batman movies, what have you. Art is by Ryan Smallman, colors are by Frank William, letters by Buddy Boisdan. This was announced 2 years ago, not this last San Diego Comic-Con, but 2 San Diego Comic-Cons ago. There's a website where you can go, just Google Arcbound, and you can see it, and you can read a lot about this. There was an ash can, and basically this is a world where there's some sort of galactic empire that's ruled by a queen, and they're similar to Energon. There's this mineral that needs to be mined that their military uses, and it's obviously very important and very valuable. But there are a lot of colonies out there that sort of want to break away and just be independent. But for some reason, the Queen believes that they need more and more of this resource, even though they have tons of it stockpiled that should last them years. But there are these beings called the Evers that supposedly are going to return, whatever that means. And so the Queen feels like they need more. So they're going out and they're trying to subdue these colonies. And once they subdue a colony, they take the inhabitants of that colony and they transpose them into arcs, which are basically like these cyborg robotic mechanisms that they then can go in the mines and mine forever because they've functionally become immortal. But it's like eternal servitude, eternal slavery. This soldier here, who we meet in the first issue, Kai, he feels that they're going over the top. They shouldn't be killing all these colonists, especially when he finds out some of them are offering to surrender, like right from the start. And he's losing faith in the Empire, if you will. And so in this first issue, when he tries to express his reservations to the general that's in charge of the expeditionary force, because they literally just subdued this planet and got them to all start mining this mineral. And they're told, okay, we literally are moving on to a new planet, Terralux, and we're going to do the same thing there. And he's like, wait, what? We just subdued a planet. How can we need, this much of this mineral? We have enough chromium to last 20 years. And the general's like, well, it's not your place to question the Queen, and she's worried about the Evers coming back and what have you. And so, obviously he doesn't have a choice. He's a soldier in this army, and he's going to follow orders. But he gets, in the middle of the night, he gets a message that comes through on the bridge of the ship, but it's encrypted. So he puts it through all these algorithms to decrypt it, but it's going to take hours. And so in the meantime, him along with his supposed friend, that are the ones that are going to lead the incursion into, on the new planet, are about to go and start attacking those colonists and subduing them. When he gets the message is encrypted. He gets the results of it, and he tries to stop the invasion. He gets betrayed. He gets killed, and then wakes up in an arc. He himself has been fused to one of these cybernetic organisms, and now it's all to be continued. So, really interesting premise. It says here, betrayed by his own, Kai no longer knows who to trust, and that's the problem because the people who wanted him dead want to finish the job. He's trapped between a rebellion he doesn't believe in and an army that tried to kill him. Really interesting premise. Like I said, go over to the website and check it out. I think the Ryan Smallman art, although it's very stylized, really works for the story that's being told. I've talked to Scott about this story a little bit, and he about why it didn't come out sooner. Because again, it was announced over a year ago, and hopefully we'll have him on to talk about it a little bit more. But now that the first issue's out, and it might have just been a situation where maybe Ryan Smallman was a little bit behind. But the next couple issues are all solicited. I think the first 4 are already solicited, so they should come out month after month after month, so it doesn't lose momentum. But it's a really interesting story. It's a little tropey in terms of these ideas. It's ideas we've seen before. Almost a reluctant hero caught between two sides of a conflict and what have you. But I like the idea. The website's really cool and slick. Tom Hardy's involved, so that gives me some faith that even if it doesn't do really, really well, you may have people that support it, that show up just because they're Tom Hardy fans, if you know what I'm saying. So it gives me hope that we might see it continue for a little while. So yeah, if you're so inclined, check it out. I enjoyed the first issue, like I said. And that was one that I would not have been able to review had we got the books, or had we recorded when we probably should have, or normally would have. Anyway, let me go through quickly and talk about some other books you might want to be on the lookout for that are out today. Helen of Windhorn, issue number 6 from Tom King and Bilquis Evely has its final issue of the first arc out today. Space Ghosts from David Pepose is out today as well. Art by Jonathan Luau. That's been a book that's been really, really popular. Violator Origins, issue 3 from Mark Andreyko. Art by Jonathan Wayshak is out as well. Sticking in that Spawn universe, we also have Sam and Twitch with art by Simon Krodansky. That's written by McFarlane himself. That has its latest issue out. Talk about police procedural and, partners and what have you. That's been a really fun book as well. Power Rangers Prime has its debut issue as well. I know that's a super popular property. Dan Mora does a cover for that. So if you're so inclined, Melissa Flores has been the writer on Power Rangers for a while. She's continuing that. Michael Yig is the artist on that. I think he's been on that title for a while as well. There's also Masters of the Universe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles of Grayskull, number 2, with art by Freddie Williams. It's written by Tim Seeley. I know the first issue was just sold gangbusters, so that's out this week. Also, Black Hammer, Spiral City, number 1, obviously in the Black Hammer universe from Jeff Lemire, art by Teddy Christensen. That's out this week. And I think that's it for the books that I wanted to mention. Oh, I probably should mention Wind as well, The Power of the Blood from Boom, art by Michael Delanis as the artist, and then James Tynan tells the story of a young queer boy. That's a very popular title also. So like I said, a really huge week this week, everybody. Some really fantastic titles out. Is it easier for you to pick your book of the week with Indie, Rocky, than it was for DC?
It's pretty tough, but I'd probably go with Big Burn number 2. Because I just sort of liked I liked it. It felt like it just felt like a fun. It reminded me of a movie I really enjoyed with Mark. It was called The Italian Job.
Oh, Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. I don't know why I always liked that movie, but yeah, and it's a little bit of I liked it. Yeah, The Big Burn, and it's got the devil in it. So what the hell? Why not?
Well, you know what? I'm actually really glad that you picked that book, because I was trying to decide between that book and another. But since you picked The Big Burn, it frees me up to pick the other book. I'm going with String from Paul Tobin with the art by Carlos Javier Oliveras. I just thought it was a lot of fun. quirky characters, the whole idea of the string connecting, and the fact that we don't know at the end if she's the murderer or she's going to be murdered. Just a lot more to learn, and I thought the art was fantastic. The color work as well, which obviously really important. You know, you can see there on the cover with the pinks and the blues and what have you. So, yeah, I'll go with String as my pick of the week. So, all right. Well, if you stuck with us till the end, everybody, thank you for doing that. I mentioned before about a giveaway for Global Comics. So, starting this partnership with Global Comics, where I'm going to be doing recommendations on their platform. You're going to be able to go to my recommendations page on Global Comics and subscribe to Global Comics there from that page if you want at a discount. You'll be saving yourself some money if you do that. But additionally, I'm going to be starting with next Wednesday's Indie Spotlight. I'm going to be giving away a code good for 1 month membership, 1 month subscription to Global Comics. So we'll do that for the next few Wednesdays, and then for the 12 Days of the Comic Source episodes, I'll be giving away one every day for the 12 days leading up to Christmas, and then on Christmas Day, we'll be giving away a code that's good for an entire year, a whole year of Global Comics, which is a value of over $100. So if you're thinking to yourself, hey, yeah, I'd love to check it out, I really want to see what's available on Global Comics, because it's not just DC books and Top Cow books and Image books and, you know, all the other publishers they have there. If you're on Global Comics, you have the ability, if you didn't listen to my interview with Chris Carter, the CEO and founder of Global Comics, anybody has the ability to publish comics on Global Comics, just like anybody has the ability to put a video up on YouTube. Very similar. And you have ways to monetize it and make money off it and what have you. But if you go and join Global Comics, when you sign up, they're going to ask you all these questions about, you know, what genres you like, aliens, zombies, horror, like all that kind of stuff. And they'll recommend things based on those recommendations. And then based on what you read, the algorithm learns and will recommend more things for you to try. And so, it's a fantastic platform if you think it's something you'd like to try out. What I'm going to do is anybody who leaves a comment for this episode, I will take all the people who left comments for this episode, throw your names into a hat, I'll pull out a winner, and we'll announce it on next week's Independent Spotlight for the first giveaway. That's how we'll give away the first few Global Comics subscriptions. So if you're interested, make sure you leave a comment. You know, whether you've had a chance to check out Global Comics or you want to leave a comment about one of the books that we talked about today, or maybe there's an independent comic that you want to recommend that we check out, just leave a comment below, and you'll be entered into the drawing. So thanks everybody for joining us. Again, it was a massive week. Don't forget to head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! To see our DC Spotlight for this week that had a ton of fantastic books. And head over to the Comic Source audio feed if that's how you prefer to listen to our content, whatever platform or podcast platform you prefer. And then obviously if you're checking us out on audio only, if you want to see the interviews and see all the artwork we're talking about, head over to YouTube, do a search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. So that's going to do it for this episode. Really appreciate you joining us as always. Any last thoughts, Rocky?
It's a great problem to have all these comics to read. There's a lot to read every week, and I tell you, it's getting more and more difficult to pick and choose which ones to review, because there's such great choices out there.
Yeah, 100% the case. So again, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Thanks for joining us as always. We'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.